And now, the Fantasy Goodfellas podcast, presented by Blindside Football, with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Armando Marsal.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Goodfellas podcast. I am your host, Justin Lonero, and with my partner, Armando Marsal this evening. It is week 2. I'm excited. Armando, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing good. Enjoying this Thursday night game and getting ready for week 2.
I hear you, buddy. There were some good things that happened in week 1. We got to see Matt Ryan look like Joe Montana.
Oh, God, that was great. That was a great game. Shootout.
Yeah, and I think Tony Gonzalez said last year he's not great yet, but he will be. So hopefully with a healthy Roddy White and Julio Jones. Obviously, you can't replace Tony Gonzalez, but they'll be all right. And Julius Thomas did his thing, so did Marshawn Lynch. And the stars came out like they typically do.
Oh, yeah. How about Megatron?
Just, I can't believe I even contemplated drafting Dez Bryant in front of Megatron. He just seems like it's kind of like the tight end category. There's Jimmy Graham and there's everybody else, and I think that goes the same for Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
We are presented by Blindside Football, and this is Armando and myself, our podcast, and it's going to be a weekly sit-and-start show. We're going to bring flavor in your ear every single week. Find us on YouTube, find us on Twitter, and we can dive right into things if you want to, sir.
I'm ready.
Let's start with quarterbacks this week. Who are you starting?
I'm starting Palmer. I mean, I love what he did week 1. Threw for 304 yards and 2 touchdowns. Didn't make any mistakes. They spread the ball a lot. 11 different receivers caught a ball. He's taking on the Giants' defense. I mean, they got torched by the Lions. We were just, talking about Megatron. They allowed 346 passing yards and 2 touchdowns in week 1, and this Giants team just looks awful. So, I mean, I like what I saw from Palmer, and I'm confident to plug him in my lineup this week.
Yeah, they look terrible. And Carson Palmer, it's interesting if we're going to see Michael Floyd take over as the number 1 wide receiver there. I'm not going to do that until Larry Fitzgerald eventually retires. There were some scares with Andre Ellington. The team looks good on paper. I think it's a matter of whether everybody can stay healthy. But Palmer is definitely a candidate this year. I've even heard people say 5,000 yards. I think the jury's still out on that. Yeah. So that's a good play, though, for sure. I'm going to go ahead and start Andy Dalton at home against the Atlanta Falcons. Andy Dalton was a top 5 quarterback last year by fantasy standards. The Falcons have allowed 7 of the last 8 quarterbacks on the road, when they're on the road, the Falcons, that is, to throw multiple touchdowns. So the defense is suspect. You saw with Drew Brees. It was a shootout last week, week 1, against them. Obviously, Andy Dalton's not Drew Brees, but he plays pretty good at home. A.J. Green is a little banged up. Gio Bernard looks great. He actually looked real good, and we're talking about, not a 50-50 split, but Jeremy Hill was supposed to be involved a little more than he was. I guess they promised him more touches. So I do like the Bengals. I like Andy Dalton, I should say, against that Atlanta team. And I think there's going to be a lot of points in that game. So as far as sitting, who's going to be your sit this week, Armando?
I'm going to go with Phillip Rivers. It's a tough matchup, the Seattle Seahawks. Anytime I see that defense, it makes me think twice. I told a follower last week I wouldn't bench Rodgers, and, they held Rodgers to, 189 yards and a touchdown. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, 189 yards and a touchdown. You got that defense that, look what they did to Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl. They're too strong. So I'm sitting Rivers. I'm going to stay away from Rivers this week and keep him on my bench.
Yeah. Phillip Rivers, when you look at his numbers, they're deceiving. He threw 30 touchdowns last year. He's a guy he's sneaky, and he seems to fall into the top 12, top 13 or 14 quarterbacks. So he's a potential starter every week. But like you said, this week against Seattle, I try to fade everybody when they play Seattle. For me, it's going to be Jay Cutler this week, and he was my start. He was my start last week, against Buffalo. he's going to have to throw the ball a lot more. His offensive line is a little banged up. We shall see in San Francisco. Jay Cutler is a gambler. Throws the ball a lot, throws the ball off his back foot once in a while. We'll see. This, like you talked about last week, the Niners defense
actually looked really good week one. I was very surprised. I wasn't expecting that good of a performance in week one against Dallas. I mean, holding Romo to just 281 yards. I mean, and like you said, Cutler slings the ball like Romo, and Romo threw 3 interceptions against this defense. I wouldn't be surprised to see Cutler throw a couple himself.
Yeah, I agree, and it's tough to say sit Jay Cutler, but after starting, it's funny how this works. You can advocate for him 1 week, and then you're going, I'm gonna go ahead and sit him. I mean, if there's other options, there's certainly other plays out there, and you can stream quarterbacks. That's what I'm finding where the NFL has changed.
And how about the injuries to Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey also play?
Well, that's just it.
Yeah.
That's it. They're both banged up a little bit. Whether or not I don't know if Jeffrey's going to play. I think he's more suspect than Marshall. Brandon Marshall's going to play. He doesn't miss any games. Bennett might be a pretty good play for tight ends where they're a little banged up, like you said, on that end. So yeah, Cutler, he could definitely be a bust because of the injuries, and that's a shame when you start to see injuries this early. There's room for some concern. So we'll go ahead and move to running backs. Who are you starting this week, sir?
Well, Arian Foster. Remember when we start him no matter what?
Yep.
That all changed a couple of years ago, but I mean, every preseason he drops in the rankings just because of his injuries. But there's nothing to worry about now. He's healthy. He opened up the season with 103 yards, and he also caught 2 passes for 17 yards. And I mean, he's going against the Oakland Raiders defense. I mean, they surrendered 212 yards and a touchdown in week one. They allowed the most the most yards on the ground that week. So I'm looking for him to just run right through this defense.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that about Arian Foster because a couple of years ago he was just about 1 or 2 in every draft. Who are you taking first? And as the injuries have happened, because a lot of people suggested that Gary Kubiak ran him into the ground, and he, Father Time's catching up to us all, Armando. But the volume is still there. We saw it week one. And as an owner, for me, I know, and they're a dying breed. Featured running backs that get the ball 25, 30 times are a dying breed. They're almost extinct. We're seeing that, I feel like, every week. There's 2, 3 guys in every backfield that could get 10, 10, and 10. Foster seems to be one of the guys, as we saw in week one, 25 to 30 touches. So that's actually a great play. And I bet he a lot of people could steal him in this year's draft, second round, depending on the league, where a couple of years ago he was the first pick in many drafts. So it's funny how things can change overnight, and by the NFL standards, you're 30 years old, you're ancient. Not that he's quite 30 yet, but he's getting up there. But it's good to see him, healthy and carrying the rock a ton. Because Arian Foster is one of the special talents in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm going to go ahead and play No Sean Moreno, as bizarre as this sounds.
I like it, though. I like it.
You're in Miami, so you know what the deal is. Yeah, yeah. I mean, Lamar Miller might get the start again, which is it's a weird running back situation down there. But what he did to my New England Patriots, 24 carries, 134 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, those are RB1 numbers. This is a guy that probably went way late in drafts. He was coming into the preseason with knee injuries. The Broncos let him go for a song. And here we are talking about him week 2 going, start him at Buffalo. Who knows, though? I mean, Lamar Miller can do his thing. That backfield confuses me. I mean, you're in Miami. You have a better idea as to what's going on. What do you think about Moreno?
I mean, I like him this week. I like him. I mean, Buffalo's a good matchup for him, and I think he showed that he's a tough runner, and he's a big reason why we won that game. Week 1, running tough, and when a running back runs that tough, you get everyone fired up. The defense wants to play hard for you, so I definitely think they're going to carry that over this week and give them plenty of looks, give them plenty of touches.
Yeah, he's physical. He's physical, and the Dolphins might have come up with a diamond in the rough with him because Moreno's one of these guys, and I liked him. I watched him a lot at Georgia. A lot of people thought he was a product of Peyton Manning's system last year. Peyton Manning can make anybody look decent, and the Dolphins might be on to something. But I think the question is, what do you do with Lamar Miller, who's 23, and they've invested in him. So, who are you sitting?
I'm sitting Reggie Bush. Surprise, surprise. I'm sitting Reggie Bush. I mean, 9 carries for 15 yards in week 1. He did have 6 catches for 49 yards, but it appears that the Lions are going to, run the rock with Joikie Bell. And they're going against the Carolina Panthers. I mean, Carolina was ranked 2nd against the run last season. They actually allowed the fewest rushing touchdowns, tied with Seattle for just 4. And they held the Tampa Bay Bucks running backs, and we went to just 102 yards. It didn't allow them in the end zone. So I definitely think that, unless you're in a PPR league, Bush is just too risky to start this week.
Yeah, he is. And Carolina is as stingy as they come as far as plugging the run. So I'm actually fading both of those guys. But you watch. I mean, stranger things have happened, but that's definitely I wouldn't advocate for anybody to start Bell, or Bush this week, for that matter. I'm going to go ahead and sit Ryan Matthews versus Seattle. It's weird to say this. I actually like Ryan Matthews this year a lot, Armando. He finally played 16 games last year. I think that's the running back that they drafted. That's who they wanted to draft. He's constantly banged up with injuries. But as he showed last year, 280 carries. He's a guy that can handle the load. I know they got Donald Brown in the offseason. Danny Woodhead is still there. Ryan Matthews is the guy to own in that San Diego backfield. But, unfortunately for his sake, they have the Seattle Seahawks this week. And I think you're sitting Phillip Rivers, Ryan Matthews. You don't want to start anybody against the Seattle Seahawks. They bottled up Lacey, although he had a concussion, and they haven't allowed a touchdown since Week 7 of 2013. That Seattle defense on the ground. So it's unfortunate for the Chargers to have to play Arizona in Week 1, and then tough NFC West it's tough. So I'm going to fade Ryan Matthews. I mean, a lot of people don't have the luxury to hit with 4 or 5 viable running backs, but if there are other options, you saw what they did to Eddie Lacy, who is a premier running back in this league. There's got to be better options than Ryan Matthews, especially in daily leagues.
Yeah, I'm staying far away from him this week as well, and I'm like you. I like him. I think he's a good back, and I think they finally are getting what they actually drafted. Like you said, what they drafted. And I think he's going to have a good season. Just this week is one of those weeks where, like you said, Seattle defense, they're tough. They're tough. So I'm going to stay away from him as well. But there's other backs out there that we can, we'll get into later. Some guys we like.
Oh yeah, and and I like Ryan Matthews. I really do. And I talked about volume a few minutes ago. Ryan Matthews is a guy that can get the ball 280 times with 30, 40 catches. I love that. I think I love that because there's only a few guys left that can do that or that are willing to do that. And if he stays healthy, he's one of those guys. Well, let's shift over to wide receiver. Who do you like? Who are you going to start this week? I mean, there's wide receivers deep, so there's a ton of guys you can mention. It seems like a position you can get away with even streaming the waiver wire with. Who's your start this week at wide receiver, Armando?
Well, I'm going with one of my breakout candidates of this year, and that's Michael Floyd. I mean, he started the season just like I expected, 5 catches, 119 yards. He was targeted a team high 7 times. And San Diego's defense is underrated. They're not as bad as most people think, and he did a good job against them. So I'm expecting another good job against the Giants. Like mentioned before, they allowed Mega to catch two touchdown passes, allowed 346 yards to the receivers on the other end. And, he's a third-year receiver. He's coming off 1,041 yard season and 5 touchdowns. I'm expecting a big year from him. And one guy I want to watch on that team is rookie John Brown. I like how they used him, and I think he's someone to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And like you said, they spread the ball around. For sure. And Palmer's another guy that you can stream. Like, he's my backup in my home league, and I'm perfectly fine when Matt Ryan has the bye to plug him in because there's some weapons on that Arizona team. I don't know that Carson Palmer's glued into any of them, but it's nice to be able to spread the ball around, and I'm hoping that Andre Ellington can be everything that people want him to be because he's an exciting talent. So they have some balance on that Arizona offense as well.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start Randall Cobb, and he was targeted 9 times last week against the Seattle Seahawks. They're going to be at home. They're playing the Jets. The Jets have their secondary is an absolute mess. I don't know if D. Milner is going to play. He's got the high ankle. Jordy Nelson's going to do his thing. I love the chemistry that Jordy Nelson has with Aaron Rodgers. When they're both healthy together, they present probably the best, arguably the best 2 or 3 tandems, wide receiver quarterback tandem in the NFL. Cobb is healthy. He's a guy that could have 90 to 100 catches this year. It wouldn't surprise me one bit on that offense. So I love them at home. I love the Green Bay Packers at home. I love Jordy Nelson, but I love Randall Cobb. And his stat line was decent. He was able to produce last week. He got kind of a garbage touchdown. I had to play him in my home league. Wasn't happy about what he did, but it happens. But Randall Cobb is one of these flashy guys. He works out of the slot, or they spread him around. It'll be good to see him play 16 games, hopefully with Aaron Rodgers. I'm loving him at home. He's my play of the week. I'm going to be playing him in a bunch of daily leagues as well.
Yeah, I agree with that start as well. Like you said, the Jets secondary is not that good. They lost Antonio Cromartie this offseason, and they're a mess. And their first week stats are a little deceiving because they played Derek Carr.
Exactly.
So I'm not fooled by that. I'm not paying too much attention to that. And I love that Green Bay offense. I think Rodgers is going to have a bounce back game. I'm actually stacking the Packers offense in one of my daily leagues.
Yeah, that's a good play. Eddie Lacy, it looks like he's going to play, so that's encouraging. It's good to see the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers have balance. It seems like they haven't had. I can remember a few years ago, Aaron Rodgers was the leading rusher of that team, and that just doesn't make sense. It's nice that he's able to move, and he does move well, Aaron Rodgers. But it's nice to see a guy like Eddie Lacy on a team like that. It's a beautiful thing to see balance in the running game, and obviously when you have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. It's a good mixture. So that's good stuff there. Now, as far as sitting, who don't you like?
I'm going to sit Victor Cruz this week. He's coming off a disappointing start of the season. 2 catches for 24 yards against a Detroit secondary that's not that good. This Giants offense just looks offbeat. Manning doesn't look in sync with his receivers. It's a bad situation. It's a bad situation, and he's taking on Patrick Peterson this week, who just shut down Keenan Allen. Allen only had 5 receptions for 37 yards in week 1, so I'm gonna stay far away from Cruz this week, and hopefully they get that offense together.
Yeah, obviously. Ben McAdoo went there from Green Bay, and Victor Cruz was supposed to take on the Randall Cobb role, who we just talked about. I don't know what's going on. The more and more I see Eli Manning, the more I think that he's not a good quarterback. He could be the worst. He's won 2 Super Bowls, and the other day was crazy. The other night I should say. But Cruz is a talent. I don't know if we've seen his ceiling. He's a big play type of guy. His volume was supposed to increase this year. There are some other guys in New York that, Ruben Randall, people talk about. They went and they drafted Beckham. He's hurt. So time will tell. It's only week 2, Armando, so let's not get too worked up. He is Victor Cruz. He'll probably be doing salsa a couple times this year. How many times he does salsa, I think the jury's out on that. I am going to go ahead and sit Keenan Allen this week. Another player who is, unfortunately for his sake, facing the Seattle Seahawks. In the last 20 years, Armando, 8 rookies have posted 1,000-yard seasons. Keenan Allen was one of them last year, Armando. Now I think the closest guy was A.J. Green to him. He headed into the season 3rd or 4th on the depth chart, and he had a hell of a year. I view Keenan Allen as a top 12 guy this year. I'm high on him. I just think he's a good blend. Poor Phillip Rivers in San Diego. I don't like him this week. Richard Sherman is there. It doesn't look good. It was Patrick Peterson. I mean, if you're Keenan Allen, you got to be saying to yourself, when is it going to get easier? It has to get easier after weeks 1 and 2. It's Patrick Peterson. So, I guess get the tough matchups out of the way and then, go ahead because it can't get any harder than it really looks like for Keenan Allen. And I'm a guy who's high on Keenan Allen. I just don't like him this week. In fact, I'm not a guy that, recommends starting anybody against the Seattle Seahawks. It's just, when we talk about Jimmy Graham being by far and away the best tight end, and Calvin Johnson is probably by far and away the best wide receiver. And as a defensive unit, the Seattle Seahawks are probably by far and away the best defensive unit. And that's just the way it is. It's good to see good defensive teams still around. And for my money, it's the Seattle Seahawks. They showed that in the Super Bowl. They made the Broncos and Peyton Manning look like a junior varsity field hockey team. So,
yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. And one thing I did want to mention here is fantasy owners. Let's not panic on Keenan Allen. Let's understand the situation here. He's facing 2 of the top corners in week 1 and 2. Arguably the number 1 corner and the number 2 corner. Mm-hmm. So let's it's a good time to buy low on him if you want, but don't panic and make a decision based off these 2 games.
Yeah, that would be premature, and I view Keenan Allen as a wide receiver 1 for my money. He is Phillip Rivers' primary wide receiver, or primary receiver for that matter, in front of Gates and Ladarius Green. So Allen's the guy to own. There's going to be some games where, and Rivers had 31 touchdowns, I want to say, last year, so he's going to spread. Phillip Rivers still has it. As ugly as his arm motion is, and he's not a guy that throws a deep ball particularly well. Keenan Allen, after these 2 weeks, is going to be a solid play because it has to get better, right, Armando? I mean, it can't get much more difficult for him.
No, it cannot. It cannot.
Let's shift over to tight end. And I can go ahead and start this one if you want. I'm liking Delanie Walker this week. You and I have talked about the Tennessee Titans a little bit, and Justin Hunter. There's some. It's an ambiguous situation in Tennessee for me, but it's also intriguing because there's some talent down there. You talk about Bishop Sankey, you talk about Justin Hunter, and Kendall Wright. I'm big on. I'm not. Walker's one of these guys. And I said this to you before the show. There's Jimmy Graham, there's Julius Thomas, and when put the emphasis on when Rob Gronkowski's healthy. There's 3 guys, and then the rest is mediocrity as far as I'm concerned, especially from a fantasy football standpoint. And Walker falls into that category for me. This particular week, he's at home. He's playing the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys gave up 2 touchdowns to Vernon Davis last week. I know it was kind of a weird game how that game went. We didn't see a lot of Michael Crabtree. We didn't have to. It was weird how that game transpired. But Walker, I think there are some pieces in place, Armando, in Tennessee for them to win a few games this year. And from what we saw from the Cowboys, they are god-awful. So like I said, for me, and why I'm advocating for Delanie Walker this week is, it's pretty simple. Vernon Davis got in twice. I think you have to be content with Delanie Walker if he has 5-6 catches, 60, 70 yards, and gets a touchdown. Serviceable. You got to be happy with that. He's not Jimmy Graham. He's not Julius Thomas. Those are the type of numbers you're going to get from that batch. And there's a pretty big batch of mediocrity. I mean, they're obviously NFL starting. They're pros. They're starting tight ends. But after the top, Jimmy Graham, Thomas, and Gronk, there's going to be weeks where Walker will be more than serviceable, and this is one of those weeks. Who do you like at tight end, bud?
I like Dwayne Allen of the Colts. He was someone I had high hopes for this season. He caught 4 passes for 61 yards and a touchdown in Week 1 against the Denver Broncos. And this week, he's taking on the Eagles at home in the Dome. I'm expecting another shootout. The over-under in that game is 54, highest over-under of the week. Last week, Marvin Lewis caught 6 passes for 35 yards. Not impressive stats, but he still caught 6 passes against this Eagles defense. So I'm expecting another big game from Allen this week in what could be the highest scoring game of this week.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I did have a little bit of concern where the Eagles, they contained the tight end play last week a little bit. There's a lot of scratch to go around in Indianapolis, and I think I was, I'm a little apprehensive to be fixated on one particular Colt, whether that's, they went and they got Hakeem Nicks, they drafted Dante Moncrief. The list goes on and on. There's 6 or 7 potential wide receivers every week for Andrew Luck. And I'm not a guy that likes to gamble on, all right, I'm going to start T.Y. Hilton or I'm going to start Reggie Wayne, because the ball, it could go anywhere any given week. If Pep Hamilton will open up that offense and let Luck do his thing, it could be a beautiful thing to see. It's just a matter of who are we going to see that particular week, So I'm going to go ahead and sit another individual that's playing the Seattle Seahawks. Go ahead, we'll sit all the San Diego Chargers. And Gates and Ladarius Green. Green, a lot of hopes coming into this season. He's a freak. He's, Gates is getting old. I once in a while I'll throw around seemingly ageless. Gates is one of those guys, and so is Steve Smith, so is Anquan Bolden. It's actually good to see, because it makes me feel youthful. Doesn't make me feel so old when these guys, older guys, perform at a high level. Now, they're not sexy guys heading into drafts, Armando. We get fixated on the Ladarius Greens and the Zach Ertzes, and although I do like Zach Ertz, because they're sexier picks, if you will. And we say to ourselves, geez, Frank Gore is getting old. And I hate to get off topic, but when I start talking, the oldie but goodies, and Gates is one of them. So until Gates hangs up his cleats, I don't see him getting overthrown, although I do like Ladarius Green going forward. Antonio Gates hasn't retired yet. But this week he's playing the Seattle Seahawks. I'm sitting Ryan Matthews. I'm sitting Keenan Allen. You're sitting Phillip Rivers. We don't like the Chargers this week, and what is there to like about them? Antonio Gates had 10 targets Monday night, against the Cardinals, who were pretty susceptible to good tight end play, and as they showed last year. He's got a terrible hamstring. It's Father Time's catching up to him just like he's catching up to all of us. He's got to act accordingly. I'm fading Gates and I'm fading Ladarius Green this week, and I don't like any San Diego Chargers, bud. And that's just the way it is. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm with you. Especially Ladarius Green that many were high on, including myself. He played just 24 of the 62 offensive snaps. That's not good for someone who has high upside. So I think this is another team that's going to be spreading the ball quite often, and it's going to be hard to guess besides Keenan Allen who's that other constant receiver tight end that's going to be consistent. But to go with a little someone different, I'm going to go with Jerry Cook. And the Bucks. It's at Tampa. It's that Rams offense. Who's going to start the quarterback? Is it going to be Sean Hill?
It's ugly. It's ugly.
Yeah, it's an ugly situation. Is it Austin Davis? We don't know. And I'm going to stay away from that offense as well. Tampa Bay's defense is not that bad. The Rams are playing away. And it's a bad situation. Yeah. So I'm taking them off my any starting roster this week.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you're going to be licking their chops. I can remember Peter King saying last year that Jared Cook looked like the best athlete he had seen in any camp. I mean, Jared Cook was going to be the next Shannon Sharp. It was unbelievable how he was talking. And unfortunately, there's two sides to every relationship. And if you can't get the football, you can't throw it to yourself. Jared Cook's one of these physical specimens that has a lot of talent, but when the quarterback play sucks, like it does in St. Louis, you're going to have some issues, and you're not going to have the numbers that people think you're going to have, and that's or speculate for you to have. And the quarterback situation is a mess. Sam Bradford goes down. I mean, it's gross. And if you're a defense, you're licking your chops. So I agree definitely. As far as defense, we can shift over to defense. What defensive unit are you digging this week, buddy?
Oh, I'm liking the Arizona Cardinals against the New York Giants. I had doubts on this Cardinal defense heading into week one. They did lose several key players, on the defensive side of the ball. And they proved that they still got it. The secondary is great. And, they did a hell of a job against the San Diego Chargers, who's a really good offense. So, against this Giants offense, who's just, there's no other word besides terrible to say. I like any defense basically, but this Cardinal defense is tough, and I think they're just gonna make Eli Manning's day a nightmare.
Yeah, until the Giants show you a little more on offense, I think you have to just keep. It's like a boxer working the cut, working the wounds, and the Giants are. Some of the mistakes Eli Manning made. He looks terrible. Oh, I'm with you, and I'll tell you what. I'm going to go ahead and start the Denver Broncos at home against Kansas City. They're a big favorite. Keem Talib is there. They went out and they got DeMarcus Ware. They got an all-star team. That Denver Bronco team is an all-star team. I think they're hoping to get better on defense this year. We talked about the Super Bowl. They look terrible. Offense sells tickets. Defense wins championships. This team is star-studded on both sides of the field. When you're Kansas City Chiefs and you have to go play the Broncos, you want to talk about a vanilla offense, Armando? That's a vanilla offense, that Kansas City team. I know Dwayne Bowe's playing. He's terrible. Alex Smith has the arm of me. And there's only so much you can lean on Jamal Charles. And that's what's happening here. So I'm going to, I can see the Denver Broncos. And I'll tell you what, I started the Denver Broncos last week against Indianapolis. People were, apprehensive because the over-under is so high. There's going to be a lot of points, but you know what? When you have the studs that this team has in place in Denver, especially against an offense as flat and generic as the Kansas City offense, you have to start a team like Denver at home. And now, that being said, if Denver goes up a couple of touchdowns, which they're probably going to do, now that opens up the gates for garbage time, and that's where it can hurt you, which is one of the worst things about fantasy football, because the defense plays their job pretty good. They go up 3 touchdowns, and the secondary sags and plays some zone, and then all the offensive production comes in garbage time. So I'm going to go ahead and start the Denver defense. I think they're going to go to the Super Bowl. So, that being said, what defense do you hate?
And I'm going to touch back on what we talked about, the New York Jets earlier. I'm not taking what they did last week into consideration. This week they're playing at Green Bay, and Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers are 2 totally different quarterbacks. They're not even supposed to be mentioned in the same sentence, to be honest. So I'm looking at Rodgers going to light up this secondary that has a lot of question marks. The Jets' run defense is good, but I think they're not going to be able to contain Rodgers, and they're going to have a bad day. I'm staying away from them this week.
Yeah, I can see the Packers just absolutely destroying the Jets, and it's good to see because I can't stand the Jets. Although I am going to the Pats-Jets game Thursday It's a Thursday night game in the middle of October.
It's gonna be a good game for you.
Yeah. It's
It's a
a
rivalry.
That's right, buddy. Just like the Dolphins. I'm going to go ahead and sit the Kansas City defense. They lost Eric Johnson to the Achilles. They're not good. The Chiefs are not good. And it seemed like that happened overnight. I mean, how can you start anybody? And they were a good unit last year, but I think a lot of the year they were one of the top two defenses from a fantasy football standpoint. Not going to start anybody against the Denver Broncos. I wouldn't. It's asinine. It's kind of like saying start Keenan Allen this week at Seattle. You're not going to do that either. The Broncos are a heavy favorite. They're at home. I think they're going to mash the Kansas City Chiefs. I think it's going to get ugly early, and there's no way I'm starting the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'll probably be riding that. You're not. They have a pretty good unit. They do have a pretty good unit going back to last year, but they lost Eric Johnson. That's huge. So that is my sit. Do you want to talk about the ugly? The good, the bad, the ugly. Why don't we talk about our sleepers? Now, you're doing quarterbacks. Who is your sleeper quarterback this week, sir? If you could have one, who's your sleeper quarterback?
I'm going with Jake Locker. You and I spoke about him last week off air, and I mentioned to you, that he's one of those guys that I think could finish, top 15 in fantasy if he can just stay healthy all season. I mean, he definitely has the weapons. Good offensive line, good run game. I mean, injuries is the only thing holding him back, and I think in week 1, a 266-yard, performance and 2 touchdowns. I mean, I think that says, a lot about him, and they actually did it against that Kansas City Chiefs defense we were talking about just now. So they're playing Dallas this week. We discussed how awful Dallas defense is.
Yep.
And Kaepernick threw for 2 touchdowns against them last week. Only 201 yards, but that's a little deceiving since they had great field position for most of the game.
Exactly.
So, I mean, Locker's that guy this week that I'm rolling with. If you have a guy like Phillip Rivers, going up against that Seattle defense, I wouldn't mind you starting Locker over him this week.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. There's some weapons there, and as a football fan, I want to see how this Tennessee situation works out. I want to see what happens with Jake Locker. I want to see what happens with Justin Hunter. I want to see if Kendall Wright can get in the end zone. He had like 94 catches last year, but just 2 touchdowns. There are some pieces there. Right? They're a sneaky team, and I like Locker too. I think you're right. I think it could be a shootout. I could also see Tony Romo having a bounce-back game from a fantasy standpoint. The jury's out there because if he looks anything like he looked against the Niners, it's going to be ugly. So I agree, but for a wide receiver, my sleeper is going to be the baby hawk, Andrew Hawkins. He had 8 catches on 87 yards, 10 targets. You have a nicked-up Jordan Cameron. You have Josh Gordon out of the. He's out of the picture. I don't know when he's coming back, but it looks like 6 to 10 games now. And they got a pretty good matchup against the New Orleans Saints. So, time will tell. But Hawkins, he's a short guy, little peanut. He'll be floating around the middle of the field. I could see him having 6, 7 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, somebody has to catch the ball, Armando. Jordan Cameron's hurting, but it's really talk about a vanilla offense. It's similar to Kansas City in the sense where you take Josh Gordon out. Now, Josh Gordon, I saw a lot of these rankings prior to him getting suspended. Josh Gordon is up there with Calvin Johnson and Demaryius Thomas. I mean, from what he did last year, the numbers were crazy in 14 games. I think we've spoken about that too. So, but if you take him out of the equation, you have a gross team. And a team that wants to run the football, too. Now, Ben Tate's hurt. Terrence West, who they drafted in the second round, is there. Jury's out on him. Isaiah Crowell. There's some young backs that I like. But if Jordan Cameron's hurt and Josh Gordon suspended, I think that would hurt any team. The quarterback play is suspect. I mean, the Cleveland Browns, and they've showed us time after time again, I mean, they are what they are. And I was hoping that things would get better. But an injury, a suspension, and you're back to where you started. So he's my sleeper at
Yeah.
at wide receiver.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier about garbage time. I mean, they're playing the New Orleans Saints, so I think he's gonna get a lot of garbage time catches.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's definitely a good sleeper there.
So somebody's got to catch the football. So
Hmm.
I think Sig Bloom, who will be on the show next week, um, he mentioned Hawkins. This was one of his favorites. I mean, some of the heading into this season. So I hate to name drop Bloom. If you're listening. Uh, kudos to you, bud. Um, let's see here. So, who is your sleeper? Who's your sleeper tight end this week? Because I'm doing wide receivers and running backs, or one of. Armando and I are going to do one of each. We're going to mix it up. And this week I'm doing a wide receiver and a running back. What do you got as a tight end this week, bud? For a sleeper?
I'm gonna dig deep here, and I'm gonna go with Jermaine Gresham.
Mm.
Yeah. Tyler Eifert is out. He won't be playing. Gresham got 5 targets last week. He only caught 2 of those.
Mm-hmm.
But this week he's taking on the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, that's another bad defense. And it showed last week. They're just gonna that team that offense is just gonna have to put up points every week if they want to win football games. And last week, Jimmy Graham caught 8 catches for 82 yards against this defense. Now, Gresham is no Graham by any means, but he's gonna be the tight end for them. There's no competition at tight end. He's gonna get the bulk of looks, when they're looking at the tight end. So five targets last week. I could see that maybe 8 targets, say he catches 5. No, five for 60 yards and a touchdown is my projection for him this week. I really like him.
Yeah, and what we talked about earlier, AJ Green's banged up a little. I think he's going to play. There's no Tyler Eifert. Marvin Jones is lost for an extended period of time. Again, somebody's got to catch the football. Gio Bernard is going to do his thing. I'm curious to see what Jeremy Hill does. How involved he is. I know they want to get him involved more, but that could be a sneaky play, especially in daily leagues. Jermaine Gresham. So
Yeah.
Jermaine Gresham falls in that category that we've been talking about as far as there's 20 guys you could stream potentially every week at tight end. And, I mean, honestly, you can play the waiver wire. It's an interesting position because if you don't have Jimmy Graham or Julius Thomas, there are some fun plays. And Gresham is one of them. So that's a good call, and I hope it works out. I'm going to go with Shane Vereen this week as a sleeper. I don't know that he's a sleeper anymore. He played 61 snaps last week. Stephen Ridley played 21 snaps. And Ridley's the guy in between tackles. We've talked about his fumbles. Shane Vereen is going to be a PPR giant. His role from a fantasy football standpoint is in the PPR format, which I think should probably get rid of redraft standard leagues because we're seeing more and more running backs like Shane Vereen. He's almost like a Pierre Thomas. Tom Brady's going to lean on like Drew Brees leans on Pierre Thomas. Shane Vereen could have 80, 90 catches this week. They're going to Minnesota. I drafted him in several leagues. I'm depending on him having 6 to 7 catches every single week. I know he broke his wrist early last season. If he stays healthy, we're talking about 80, 90 catches. I know he's not going to be a sleeper after the first couple of weeks because he's going to blow up. But for me, this week he's my sleeper at running back. And, the discrepancy between how many snaps he played and Ridley, it just goes to show you that quietly he's taken over he's their primary back, whatever that means now, Armando. Because Shane Vereen is not a guy that's going to get the ball 275 touches. He's just not that type. He's not built that way. But if he's the New England Patriots' primary running back, he's going to be featured in a lot of downs. But so.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the matchup looks a little tough, because of the Vikings' run defense. But the way that the Patriots use him,
yeah,
I don't think he's going to have a problem, having a productive day.
Yep. And like I said, so I'm not even being a homer, but Shane Vereen, and we were watching him in the preseason. The kid's got talent, and where Stephen Ridley coughs up the ball. I know they went and they drafted James White. you mark my words. If Chamberlain stays healthy, uh, he will lead the league from a running back standpoint in receptions. I know Pierre Thomas had 77, led the league last year. He's getting up there. He's in another platoon with Kerry Robinson and Ingram. So, so I'm going to go ahead and lead on Shane Vereen this week. Now let's talk about ugly. Nobody wants to talk about ugly is our version of busts. Who is your ugly quarterback this week, bud?
I'm going with Cam Newton. I had him as my sit last week. He didn't play. He's expected to play this week. He's still dealing with that rib injury. Mm-hmm. And many people might think, oh, Derek Anderson did well in this offense, ran it well last week, and did a good job filling in for Newton. But, I don't think Newton's 100%. And I think sitting last week was clear that he's not 100%. And they're playing the Lions. The Lions front seven is pretty tough. I think he's going to be pressured all game, and he's going to have to get that ball out quickly. And his mobility might not be as effective as it usually is, simply because he's not 100%. So I'm wary of him this week. I really am.
I can't blame you. Until we see how that in live action, until we see how he's doing. If it's not his ribs, it's the ankle. He doesn't have a ton of talents. We've talked about the Carolina Panthers, although I do like Kelvin Benjamin and we love Greg Olsen. But until I see Cam Newton with my own eyes in the regular season against live talent, I'm going to be fading him too at all costs. I love Cam Newton. I think he's a great talent. I think he's one of the future, the future of the NFL. But between the ribs and the ankle, I am apprehensive. Now, I'm going to go ahead and talk about an ugly wide receiver. And he didn't have an ugly week one. That's going to be Allen Hurns. It's amazing how you can have a week one like Allen Hurns had, with 4 receptions over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, and and then all of a sudden we go, Allen Hurns is the next Jerry Rice. Everybody goes and grabs him. Well, here's the thing. Playing at Washington, Marquise Lee is there. Cecil Shorts is the number one guy in Jacksonville. He's been banged up a little bit. He's had the hamstring. For me, I need to see more of a guy to just jump on the bandwagon like that. So he's going to be what's going to happen with Allen Hurns is people jump on board week one. I need to see more consistency. I don't think we're going to see it this week. Mercedes Lewis is going to be involved in the game plan. Marquise Lee plays. So he's going to get playing time. Hurns will still play, and he's definitely worth a roster spot at this point. But they are the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know how much of that, that team you want to own. So call me pessimistic and call me cynical because of the week one that he had. But I need to see more at Washington. They're going to have their eyes open on him because of what he did week one. I'm going to go ahead and fade him this week. And at running back, my bust at running back, I know we're winding down for time here, is going to be Joyke Bell at Carolina. And Armando, believe me, I'm one of the biggest Bell advocates out there. I love him. He's going to get the goal line touches. He's another guy that'll have 3, 4, 5 catches a game. Reggie Bush is still there. I'm not crazy about either of those guys at Carolina this week. If you're an opposing running back. So as much as I like Bell, and I would take him on my team, and I would play him most weeks, this is not the week I want any part of the Detroit line backfield. What about you? What are your feelings on Bell? Do you like Joyke Bell? You touched on Bush earlier and Bell earlier. What do you see happening against this Panther team?
It's a tough matchup. It's a tough matchup. If I'm gonna start any of the Lions backs, it would be Bell. But if I have the option to sit Bell and Bush because of my depth, then I definitely will sit them. These backs, their days are going to be made with people. catching the passes. So if you're not in a PPR league, if you're not in a PPR format, I mean, it's just you're taking a huge gamble. It's not really worth it in my eyes. So I mean, yeah, I can see how he has a bad day. So he can definitely be one of this week's busts.
On the road at Carolina, it's not a. There's another. They're a stingy defense.
Yeah.
So, no, this has been a lot of fun tonight. And, we are presented by Blindside Football. Our boy Marcus Kakin hooks us up. Armando and I are going to be doing this weekly. You can find us on YouTube. Fantasy Goodfellas. We do our thing. We're going to be throwing it down every single week. You can hit us up on Twitter at Lonero_Justin. You can find Armando on there, too. Why don't you tell him what your handle is?
It's at Armando_FB Guru. And I want to thank Marcus. Thank you for allowing us to do this. I'll give a shout out to DraftKings, FakeTeams.com, and thefootballgurus.com.
Yeah, that's your website.
Yes, sir.
That's your thing. You do a good job over there. You take a lot of pride in what you do on your website, and I value that. You are working for DraftKings, writing a little bit over there, and Fake Teams. You got your hands in a lot of stuff there. But everything. So it's good that you. But on Thursday nights, you and I throw down with my partner on here. We're gonna keep it real. We're gonna, and as the season gets going, we don't have a lot to go by. I don't think anybody has a lot to go by. You need to see more defenses. You need to see what's going on. To try to create educated guesses as to what's going to happen. They're all guesses, but we do the best of our ability to gather information to make the best guesses. So with that being said, you got anything else, buddy? We're going to take off. We're going to hook up next week. Sigmund Bloom's going to be on the show. Football guys, he's a beast. Armando and I are going to have him on, so we'll get some of his knowledge. But you got anything else, buddy boy?
No, I'm looking forward to sitting down with Mr. Sigmund Bloom, and I want to wish all our listeners some good luck this week, and hit us up on Twitter with any questions.
No doubt. All right, kid.